And wait a minute. You're not Jens. Who are you?
Hey, Dustin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Good Thing. As you've noticed already, this is Dustin. This isn't Jens. So Dustin, who are you? You're kind of maybe for the people that don't know you, maybe get a little quick introduction of yourself because I know you very well, but introduce yourself.
Yeah, if you would follow the comment history of WunderGraph, you would already know who I am. So, yeah, my name is Dustin, CTO, co-founder of WunderGraph, and yeah,
Yeah, fantastic.
first
As
time being
Dustin,
on the podcast. So,
yeah, it's exciting. So, Dustin, thanks for joining us. And as you mentioned, if you follow the changelog or the commit history on our repo, you'll see Dustin's name pop up a lot. So, Dustin is our CTO and co-founder. Um, he's an absolute beast. We joke around that he's a machine. And Jens is out this week, so I invited Dustin for his first podcast. And all we're gonna do is literally just talk about the technology, talk about Dustin's role here, and just kind of the things that he's been in charge of. But yeah, Dustin, thanks for joining me today.
awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so let's kind of just kick it off with a little introduction of yourself. So I know your history, but I think you have a pretty cool history of companies that you've worked at. So where you studied, where you started out with, you started off pretty early in the tech journey. I think you have like, what is it, 10, 11 years of experience now?
Yeah, roughly around that. So, I studied computer science, but very soon I figured out that that's not my career path I wanted to do. So I spent a lot of time on freelancing and also educating myself in different technologies. I spent a lot of time in open source communities, and then I found my way into several different companies. For example, HighGraph, where I worked at, and HighGraph is like a content management system um, which has a focus on GraphQL Content Federation. And I did very exciting stuff there. We have implemented a GraphQL proxy written in Rust that takes care of caching, um, which was driven by Fastly, the content delivery network deployed on Edge on the Edge. That was a pretty exciting project back then. And then I started another career at RTL, which is one of the biggest television companies in Germany, and they needed a way to consolidate, to hydrate data sources together, and the obvious solution was GraphQL. They didn't invest in GraphQL Federation back then, but I have built with my team a GraphQL gateway that aggregate the data, which was more or less a monolith graph. And I think I think today they're already migrating from that architecture to a federated graph architecture, which
Yeah,
makes
very
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so you were working at HighGraph, and the story of how Dustin joined us is actually kind of funny. So you had an open source project, which was kind of like an OSS schema registry, right? Like very early on. What was that project?
Oh, I think what you're referring to was a graph cache proxy for written in TypeScript for Cloud for workers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you were working on that. And then how did you like meet Jens? It was like you guys were working on open source, or like you started contributing to WunderGraph. What was it?
Or I think it was on Discord. Back then, I was super. I mean, today you are very busy as a founder, but back then I was very active in the community, also Discord, and I don't know how, but Jens saw what I did in several open source projects and wrote me a nice message like, "Hey, I'm interested in your stuff. You're doing some stuff with GraphQL. Uh, yeah, let's talk. Are you interested in my startup idea?" And I said, "Why not? Let's
That
do
was
it."
3 years ago. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
remember. And then you joined us. This is before the original WunderGraph. It wasn't open source. Do you remember? We open sourced it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good time. And then so you joined us, and then you have this crazy experience, which is cool. But talk to me a little bit about like how your role has changed. So you mentioned it as a founder, no more free time, which is true. But like from you going from an architect at HighGraph to CTO and co-founder. But first you weren't CTO, right? You remember when we were small enough, you were a tech lead, right?
Yeah. I think was it yesterday. I saw a YouTube video from J Combinator where they discussed the relevance of a technical founder, and you cannot outsource your startup idea. That you cannot assume that someone has the same passion like you to implement your vision, or at least your POC. That some sort of proves that your idea fits the market. So
I would
yeah.
agree.
And
Eh,
back, yeah,
I was gonna say it helps that we have two really technical co-founders, so you
yeah,
and Jens. But expand a little bit on that because I see it all the time. I see like Y Combinator non-technical folks. They're saying, "Oh, like now with Cursor and with AI, you can just build your MVP." But I totally disagree. I think if you want to build a tech company, you need a technical person, which is you and Jens.
yeah, 100% agree. I think it will shift a little bit in terms of you need to hire people. You don't have to hire on the mass. You're more higher on quality, because AI will be able to replace or automate certain things that today I think that there are people who do a lot of repetitive stuff. And I think all of these things can be replaced by AI. But if it comes to like someone who needs to be an expert in a specific domain, yeah, I think that is not replaceable. At least not in the near future. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I would agree. I think AI is going to be helpful. It's going to help with the repetitive tasks, but if you want to build what we're building, so an extremely technical platform for technical folks and platform teams, I don't think you can build an MVP with Cursor. I really don't think so because just looking at the engine code of our router, I don't think AI would be able to make the decisions that you, Sergey, and Jens make. What do you think?
I I think it's all about the people. If you I think today I could use Cursor to maybe automate some sort of things that I have built manually. But again, AI needs an operator. Like I need to know what to build. I need to know what should be the end result and what is good, what is bad. And I think AI or code or whatever can help me to speed up the process.
And
Yeah.
in your current workflow, though, as CTO, so people think like, and this is funny. I'll tell you a funny story. Is at my last job, we had a CTO, and he wasn't technical. Like he had some technical experience, but it was like 20 years ago, and he was more into a management role. That's not the case here. Like you're obviously we're small enough, but you're still very hands-on coding, implementing, helping out with the customers, things like that. Do you use any AI in your workflow? Do you use Cursor? What kind of AI tools do you use?
Um, I think nothing super special. I use Copilot daily as an integration in my IDE. Um, we have created several chat GPTs for the company for example, to write technical documentation in a specific format to align on the tone, on the style, and that helps a lot because not everyone is able to write good technical content, which is absolutely fine. It's super hard to write good documentation. Yeah, and I mean, we're already using it, I think, in every meeting to translate to transcript our customers' sessions, and that helps
Yeah,
us.
I would agree with that. Like the LLMs that we use to like go through the transcripts and find the important stuff with customer feedback, I think it's useful. When you're using Copilot, though, how do you use it? Do you still go and write the code, or do you like write like what you want it to be? So, like for example, I want a function that does this, and then it goes and it auto completes it for you, or are you actually writing out the function and you're just hitting tab for it to complete?
Yeah, more the later part. I think I haven't yet utilized that to the fullest point, but yeah, I think there's absolutely room for improvement in that to improve my workflow. But I use it usually just to complete code, and yeah.
Yeah. I've been messing around a little bit with Cursor and like some side projects, and what I don't like is sometimes like I know what I want to implement in my head, like say this function, and then I start writing a little bit of it, and Cursor goes ahead and jumps and it implements the whole function, but it's not right, and so then it confuses me, and then like it's still there on the screen. So then as I'm like implementing it, it's a little bit of annoying. Do you run into the same things kind of like that a little bit, or I don't know, like sometimes the autocomplete bothers me a little bit?
Honestly, I haven't used the cursor yet. I heard a lot about it. I didn't use it to write whole components. I'm more on the path, or more on the side of complete my existing code, and not let anything write my whole application. So yeah.
I'd agree with that. A crazy story though. So my little sister, she's about to be a senior in college, so she's finishing up her junior year, so third year of college. And for one of her classes, she had to make a personal blog. And the teacher was like, "Hey, you guys can use WordPress, you can use Wix, you know those like website like that help you like create templates of blog." And I was like, "Hey, if you want to be different, like go get Cursor, like the free plan. Go look up Next.js. Go look up like a content delivery system, like all that stuff, and just download Cursor and just start asking questions how to build a blog, and using Cursor and like just asking like Cloud the questions and things like that. In a week, she built like a fully functional like blog with Next.js, and she has no programming experience. And so I don't know. I thought that was crazy that like with AI, she was able to build a blog like on Next.js without ever having any programming experience. But then like does that make somebody an engineer? Is she an engineer now? Like she was able to develop a whole front end application with no programming experience using AI.
You know, it would be nice if doing that workflow, doing the journey, the AI would explain her what she actually did.
So
I
you
mean,
can prompt it to do that. You can be like, "Hey, let's make a blog site, but teach me the steps of what we're doing. Like, what are we actually doing?"
then I think then it's, I think, a great learning experience. If not, then it's why not using a platform to create your content. Yeah.
It's a fair point. And then so right now we're hiring like crazy, and Dustin's doing a lot of interviews, and he's like the first quality control gate for technical people. Have you noticed like since the introduction of AI and like open AI, have you noticed that like there's some AI generated code in the applications that we get, or like some hallucinations, and then you catch it on the interview, or like has it just been like the same?
Honestly, I do not really care if someone uses AI, if they're able to achieve the end result. I mean, we will always have a peer review meeting where we discuss the code, where he should explain his thought process, why he did this and that, and if he used some AI to speed up his workflow, why not? As soon as he understands what he did, and yeah. I mean,
Yeah, it's a good
it wouldn't
point.
be fair. I mean, I use AI every day. All our developers use AI every day, and why not using it in an exercise?
I think it's fair. Like it's weird. Some companies like that my friends are at, they're like no AI. Like you can use ChatGPT for like stuff like that, but no AI in the code base. And then other ones, which is crazy, they made every developer use Cursor because they're like it's going to increase productivity. And I was like, I don't know if that's true. So I don't know this whole AI thing, and like with developers, it's interesting. And then I asked Jens this question last week, but Jens explained to us like what we're looking for. Like we're pretty well aligned on the core values of WunderGraph that we're looking for in new hires. But like from a CTO point of view, what do you want a new hire to do when they come into WunderGraph? Are they more like they pass a technical bar, but what kind of attitude are you looking for? Like, what would make a good person to join us, and like, what do you look for as a CTO?
I always looking for people who are super passionate about what they're doing, and they need to be open for new things. They're always trying to put things into question if something doesn't make sense. People who are not shy to ask questions, and yeah, I think this mindset of yeah, this
I
open
would agree.
mindset about yeah, is super important. Other than that, yeah, you need to be good at your domain. If it's a platform engineer role, or is it a full stack developer role, but those things are, we will probably figure them out during interview or during the exercise. But if you're super keen to learn new things, and you love what you're doing, I think this is the core principle. Yeah.
I would agree. So I think it's a good transition to kind of like, let's get a little bit into the tech. So I want to talk about a mistake that we made pretty early in our journey as startup founders. So for those of you that don't remember, we had WunderGraph SDK, and we decided to create WunderGraph Cloud, which what you could think of is WunderGraph was this great framework for building applications, and we built a cloud on top of that. And one of the key decisions, I remember this, where we were sitting in the room, we said, we're going to use fly.io. They're a startup, but we're going to bet on them. We're not going to do AWS. They have this great firecracker. You can talk a little bit more on that part, but and if you guys saw the news, Terso is also migrating, or Terso is migrating also away from Fly.io. A lot of people are leaving Fly.io, but walk me through like kind of like that decision that we made to use Fly.io, and like what we experienced, and then like kind of like as a CTO, like how that affected us, why we moved away, and just kind of like how reliability is king in a cloud hosting company, if you will. We'll just talk a little bit about like what happened with Fly.io.
Yeah, I think that's I would say a funny and a sad story. So if you're building a startup, you want to be fast, you want to prototype very quickly, you want to figure out if this is a fit, and everything that can support you will probably also utilize. And for us, Fly was a great candidate of deploying custom CI, custom containers worldwide, with little cost, with little steps.
It was so
The
easy.
Yeah, easy. The provider, they provide a great API to, or I would say an easy enough API to, that was worth to explore. And yeah, and but the more and more traction you get from your product, and people beginning to rely on you, you also need to be reliable as a service. And then we figured out that the service that Fly provides in terms of support, even paid support, or API stabilities, they couldn't provide the right guarantees to us. And after several incidents, we had to make a cut. And yeah.
It's difficult because what Fly is building is amazing. Like if it works, like to provide that service as APIs, they were so easy to spin up a container. The Firecracker VMs was really cool and they were really fast, but the reliability part is hard. People don't understand, and this actual industry scares me. So the cloud, like just to give you like an understanding of how big the cloud market is. So Vercel did 100 million in ARR. AWS did like what was it, like 100 billion or like some ridiculous number. And then you have Azure doing like 60 billion ARR. Like they're just doing that in ARR. So you can imagine how big is the cloud market. And I was talking about this with Dax actually this week. Any company that builds like on top of the cloud, so meaning like Vercel, they provide a great front end experience, but it's built on AWS. eventually they have to become the same price as AWS, because any consumer like us, like, you'll get to a point where you're paying so much just for the experience and you're like, why is there such a margin on top of a cloud? You know what I mean? So like eventually that provider will have to bring their price down to be equal as AWS, and then they have to provide value on top of that. I don't know, just something we were talking about. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's right. And there are reasons why AWS is the most popular and the first candidate in choosing reliable infrastructure. And yeah, as I said, like as a startup, and you don't have any customers, you have to count any cent. It's you can rely on fly until you have proven your point, your product. But as soon as you get serious, you want to have uptime, you want to have guarantees, and I would never choose Fly or any other provider again if my goal is to build a reliable foundation for my company. So then
And
I would rather spend a little bit more money than trying out new things that are unproven.
And so with that learning, so we chose Fly for WunderGraph Cloud, and then when we started building Cosmo, we pivoted all going all in on Federation. We built an extremely reliable piece of software. So what were some of the decisions that you chose? Like, what do we host on? It's boring tech. It's extremely boring. It's not like exciting like Fly with Firecracker VMs and all this stuff. We chose boring tech this time. So what did we choose for Cosmo, and like why did we make those decisions?
Yeah, I think all comes back to our learnings from WunderGraph Cloud. We no longer rely on fancy tech. So right now we use GCP, their Kubernetes offering, to run our platform or to run our reference architecture. You also find on Cosmo Docs. And yeah,
I can actually bring it up. Let me bring it up.
What else? We also rely on Cloudflare Workers to distribute our router configs, which are super reliable. Yeah, I think one of the core values of our architecture, but also in general for small startups, is mind your own business. So we never try to be an expert in any technology here except our own product. So for ClickHouse, for example, we rely on ClickHouse Cloud. We don't want to run ClickHouse clusters, at least not at this point. We use managed databases as where we can, and this also includes, for example, for Keycloak, which you see in the middle, which is our identity provider for authentication and federated auth. We also use Cloud IAM, which is a managed solution for Keycloak. And yeah, frontend is running on Next.js Vercel. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very simple, very boring, but I think you have to go through what we did with like relying on a provider, and then imagine telling your customers like, yeah, our service is down, but there's absolutely nothing we can do about it because our provider is down. And so we made the decisions to go boring with Cosmo. And I think that's the thing you're paying for with AWS or GCP. You're not paying for an amazing experience, which is why there's so many companies that build on top of AWS to make it better. But two things on that is, one, when you look at AWS and you look at how clunky everything is, there's a reason they made those decisions. They've thought about it extensively, and there's a reason why some things are clunky, and it's because of reliability. They made those decisions because they want to make sure that the platform is reliable, and it's kind of slow on purpose, and which is why you have companies build on top of that to make it better, make AWS not a pain. And then the second one is, it's such an interesting space because, like, if you think about it, I'm just going to unshare. If you think about it, if a company were to come in and make AWS 10 times better, but they also provided the reliability, like what I'm trying to say is, like, do you ever think somebody could overtake AWS? Like, I'm like a big guy for like David versus Goliath stories. Like, I like, for example, DeepSeek and OpenAI. OpenAI is the giant, and then DeepSeek destroyed them for a little bit. We don't know what will happen in the future, but Do you think somebody could ever do that to AWS?
I would say for sure, but even let's say someone is doing that, it needs to be proven. It needs to be proven for years, and
But how do you do that? Like AWS like has the reliability, AWS has the logos, and AWS is the cheapest. Like how do you compete against that?
I wouldn't say AWS is the cheapest, but I think there's definitely room for competitors on the market. But yeah,
It's tough.
it's yeah. I mean,
I'm telling you, you can't. Like I'm huge on David versus Goliath stories, but and hopefully I'm wrong in my lifetime, but I don't think you can compete against AWS. Even me and Jens say this all the time. Like AWS wins every single time simply because it's AWS. It's too big to fail.
yeah, I think you can build optimized solution to pull some percentage from their market, but when it comes to really reliability infrastructure, and they will they become better and better. It's no longer that shitty UI. It's I think the last time I checked AWS, it's no longer that bad as it was before. And
Yeah, it's getting better, but no, it's a good point. And then I kind of want to transition into kind of what we've been talking about this week. So I just released a broadcast to all of our customers. And so we made some really cool changes, and Dustin worked on something pretty cool, which is a blog post coming out soon. But talk to me a little bit about the telemetry pipeline, and maybe for some of the viewers, kind of explain like what that was, why you built it, and what it's going to do to Cosmo as a platform.
yeah, it's a yeah. I think it's a very interesting technical issue. It's not so amazing, but it's yeah, I would say it's still pretty interesting. So you need to imagine that when a customer runs our router and a GraphQL request hits the router, we analyze what types and fields has been used, and this usage data is then pushed to our cloud infrastructure and need to be ingested into our ClickHouse cluster. So now you can assume that when a customer with a lot of traffic will also produce a lot of schema usage data. So first step is to batch the data inside the router. So assuming someone sends the GraphQL operation, always the same operation, and it hits 500,000 times the router. So we don't have to send 500,000 operations or schema usage operation to Cosmo. We will batch it, and we will then send a counter of 500,000 to our cloud. So that was the first optimization step. So in other words, we batch at the router level and then periodically push the schema usage data to our cloud. And what I mean with cloud is like we maintain a fleet of metrics collectors, which are responsible of ingesting this data directly to ClickHouse. And if you are a bit familiar with data pipelines, you know that the more traffic we will produce on the router side, the more traffic it will generate and push to our collector fleet. And if the collector fleet will directly ingest the data to our ClickHouse cluster, we will have, at some point, we will hit a wall, because ClickHouse will not be able to keep up with the load, and we would need to scale ClickHouse, and that is expensive. So what can we do? We have to instead of pushing the data, we have to pull the data from a queue, for example Kafka. So what we did was to implement like we could say a buffer, or a buffer structure between the collectors and ClickHouse. So ClickHouse is able to pull the data at his own pace. And in that way, we don't have to overscale the ClickHouse cluster just to keep up with the load. We can we can have implement like a back pressure mechanism between the collectors and clickers.
Yeah, that's super cool. So like, if I understand it from like, we always joke around. So like, I'm non-technical. I have like very limited experience as a software engineer, but I did implement some cool stuff. But I didn't work with ClickHouse. I didn't work with Redis. I have nowhere near the experience with you. But if I'm understanding this correctly, so Cosmo's growing. We have some customers that do billions of requests per day. And what that would do is once it goes through the router and it heads over to ClickHouse, it would kind of overload ClickHouse and it would kind of have to scale up super fast. It also isn't super performant and it would not only just drive the cost up like crazy, it also wouldn't be performant for the customer. And so what you've implemented with this telemetry pipeline is a system that basically kind of we still take in the same amount of requests, like you said, like 500,000 requests, but we kind of spread it out and kind of put it in a queue, and then it's processed into ClickHouse on a schedule. And what that does is it allows ClickHouse to scale up slowly, and it doesn't actually overload ClickHouse, right?
Exactly. And also interesting is because we're using ClickHouse Cloud, they have an offering called ClickPipes that allows you to connect your ClickHouse cluster with any third-party database, which includes Kafka, which includes BigQuery, and they maintain the worker fleet that pulls the data from your data source, for example, Kafka, and imports the data into the right ClickHouse tables. So in that way, we don't have to maintain the worker fleet. We don't have to be an expert in that area. And the only responsibility we have is to push the data into a Kafka cluster, taking care of it that retention policies are properly configured, that the Kafka clusters are healthy, and yeah.
No, it's super interesting. And people are always saying this in Discord. They're asking, hey, like I want to spin up Cosmo, I want to self-host it, but I don't have any ClickHouse experience. Do I need ClickHouse? And we always tell them, yes, it's like the central source of truth. You need ClickHouse. Like, any thoughts on that, Dustin? It's a funny question we get all the time.
I would say it's still a good question. There might be users out there that don't need that scalability that ClickHouse can provide, and there might be sufficient with Postgres. But that would require a lot of implementation on our end to also support different databases, and in our current route, that's not worth it. But overall, you need some database that is suitable for analytics workloads to process the OpenTelemetry data that is emitted by the router and also the schema usage data. If you don't want analytics and only you want to use a schema registry, that's I'm not sure who's doing that.
Technically, it's possible. It doesn't make sense for us because we are ingesting large-scale data. So for us, that's the reason why we built it. We built it with scale in mind. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, yeah, like maybe someday in the future, there's like a Cosmo Lite where it's like a smaller version of Cosmo with just a schema registry, the router, and like a Postgres database. But for now, there isn't. So to answer the question, like, yeah, if you're going to self-host Cosmo, you will need to use ClickHouse. But I like what Dustin said. Like, when you're building a platform that uses other people's technologies or other technologies, frameworks, concepts, it's better not to be an expert in them. Like, we're not authentication experts. We use Keycloak and then we use Cloud IAM, which is a managed service of Keycloak, because you don't want to be an expert. We don't want to roll our own auth. What we want to do is provide the most value we can for our customers. And the same thing with ClickHouse. We use managed ClickHouse, right? We don't self-host ClickHouse.
Exactly.
Everything is just kind of managed, right? We use GCP, their Kubernetes offering. Do we self-host anything?
Except from our own components we have developed, no. At least we try our best not to doing it. It's also, for example, valid for our Kubernetes cluster. We use GCP Autopilot, so we don't have to worry about auto scaling. We use GCP complete observability platform ensure uptime, to implement proper alerting and analytics.
Yeah. And why did we decide, or why did you decide to go with GCP over AWS when we first started out with Cosmo?
That's a good question. I had experience with GCP already. I knew about the autopilot offering, and I did a quick POC in GCP, and the whole user experience was much better than on AWS. And
Yeah, no,
I
it's a
think
fair point.
you could have built the same on AWS or on Azure, but none of these providers, as far I remember, do not offer a similar service to autopilot. You can implement it. For example, AWS has Carpenter, which is like a Kubernetes controller that does auto scaling for you. But here again, I don't want to experiment. I just want to buy something and solve the problem. So throw money at it, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what you're supposed to do with VC funding. I mean, no, jokes aside, I think this is what I struggle with a lot. So I have a lot of good technical folks, like friends, and this is the first mistake we made at WunderGraph is we built a technically super cool product, like with Firecracker, the CI/CD pipeline that we set up, the GitHub Actions. We used so much cool tech. It was bleeding edge. It was amazing, but it didn't solve a problem. It didn't solve a problem pain enough. And then when we pivoted into Cosmo, we started realizing that the tech is secondary. You want to choose boring, reliable tech that gets the job done, but you want to focus on solving the problem for the customer. And that's exactly it. Dustin, you did a quick PLC, you tried AWS, you tried GCP, you saw that the developer experience allowed you to ship faster. It had the auto scaling feature. You thought of our customer, and boom, that's why we implemented it. There's no weird like, oh, like this, that. It's a better technology. It's no, it got the job done, and we need to focus on our customers. I like that. Sorry,
Yeah,
my dog is like freaking out.
don't forget, a big motivation was Google GCP startup credits.
Yeah, I actually forgot about that. So like if you're a startup, clouds will give you crazy discounts. They'll give you like 100,000 and like credits. And let me actually give you guys a very good tip. Okay. If you're building on any cloud platform, get the credits. As soon as the credits are over, tell them that another competitor is giving you double the credits if you migrate over, and tell them you're going to migrate over. You don't have to actually migrate over, but they'll come back and they'll give you 50,000 credits or 60,000 credits. As long as you're small enough, always use the other cloud provider as leverage to get more credits. It's somebody told me this. The guy from Railway, actually, he said to use this. And so now every time, like they come up to us and they're like, hey, like you guys are running low on credits. We're like, yeah, we're looking at jumping to AWS. They're like, wait, no. Here's 40,000 credits. Please stay. We're like, okay, we'll take it. I think that's kind of like a funny little hack. It also is like startup mentality. Like always make sure that you're getting the cheapest, tools, but that get the job done. And Dustin, my next question I want to ask you is, we've built a lot of cool features into WunderGraph Cosmo. What was a feature that you were really proud about or like really enjoyed building, but also made a big impact with our customers? Like your favorite feature into Cosmo?
My favorite feature.
I know there's so many. There's advanced request tracing. There's, just basically the analytics view. There's the router. There's
I think
Studio.
I think the mouse. I would say the complete open telemetry integration. So from the router into Cosmo, setting up the auto collectors properly, setting up ClickHouse scheme. I think that was very interesting, and it's and it's still not done yet. It's it's still there's still a lot of things to do.
And walk me through that. So like I understand to an extent of like open telemetry, but basically a year ago, our major competitor, they didn't allow you to kind of like send OTel data to your own like Datadog or wherever you wanted to monitor it. without an enterprise plan. And we built that fully into the solution. And so what does that mean? Like OTel telemetry that you can export it to Prometheus, to Datadog, like kind of explain it to me and for maybe some of the non-technical folks.
Yeah, OpenTelemetry is a standard how to collect metrics, traces, spans, events, and there also no support logs. It is just like a convenient, unified approach to instrument your application, for observability needs. And so before you usually use custom integration like Datadog, New Relic, which auto instrument your application through some non-standardized API. You was able to create custom metrics, and now you can just use an OTel compatible SDK and push the data to a compatible OTel collector, and from that point on, you can distribute or share the data across multiple platforms.
Yeah. And OTel is interesting, and so is observability. Like, if you talk to any big company, the first thing that they'll tell you is our AWS bill is crazy, and then they'll say our Datadog bill is crazy. And so the reason why it's so expensive is like when you're such a big company, is observability is key. Like imagine like having like what would you not do if you didn't have any analytics or data of like your platform? And one of the things there's this company that's doing an open source alternative to Datadog. And their key selling point is that you can self-host it. And I always thought that was weird because I don't think you should self-host observability, because if your infrastructure goes down, how do you know what happened if you're self-hosting your observability? Right?
Yeah.
Like like what do you do then? Oh, our infrastructure is down. I can go look at Datadog and I can understand and look at the tracing, the spans. I can see what services went down. I can understand it. But if I'm self-hosting it, in my infrastructure is down, like how do I know what happened?
Yeah, but also nothing prevents or nothing. Also, Datadog go down, right? Then you also blind some.
Yeah, but Datadog going down is like AWS going down. That's a lot of money on the stock market that'll be really upset.
That's right. I would also say that the probability that Datadog is down is less than your own infrastructure. I think at the end it's always a question of money and how much you can spend on such a service. And again, what I already said on the cloud part, on the cloud architecture, on the design principles, mind your own business and buy the service. Unless you have very good reason to ship your own stuff, like if your Datadog bill is a couple of millions, maybe it's time to move on and optimize your stack. And
The problem I have with that is you're different because you're a startup founder. But as an engineer, and like somebody actually told me this, is that they work at one of the largest retail companies in the world. And one of the engineers said, "We are not a tech company, we are a fashion company." And the issue with that is that engineers like to build cool stuff. They like telemetry pipelines. They like trying to self-host stuff. They would be super interested in, setting up bare metal servers and the racks and everything. And you want to work at a company where you get to do that type of stuff. And so the issue is engineers want to build cool stuff. They don't really care for the business. Like I have a couple friends that work at like Pinterest or they work at Walmart, and they don't actually care about Walmart, but they care about the tech, the stuff that goes in to power that. They build cool stuff and it's really cool. And same thing with Pinterest. Like they don't even have a Pinterest, but the stuff that it takes to power Pinterest is interesting for them. What do you think on that? Like it took you a little bit of time. We've seen it with all technical folks on the team that they went from a pure engineer mindset to a business mindset. Like, let's get the job done because the customer matters, not, hey, this is the coolest solution. Let's build this because it's super cool. And then the customer comes second.
great question.
I know it's tough because like
I mean, as an engineer, you always you love to experiment. You love to innovate, but you also need to compare with the reality. Like how if you're building a business, I think there are a lot more things you have to worry about than about your foundation. So you need to build you need to build the right foundation, but nothing prevents you from experimenting and innovating. So I think you can still do great stuff, and you can still doing interesting stuff, for example at WunderGraph. But yeah,
You need both, I think. You need, like, I think this is good career advice. Like, if you're early in your career or you're a senior engineer or principal engineer, at that point, you're not hired because you like cool tech and you can build cool POCs. You're hired to make direct business impact. And if you put on your business hat and think, okay, I'm going to build something, but how is it going to generate more business? You can rise up the ranks pretty quickly. And for example, I have a friend, he works at I think it's Meta or it's Microsoft. He's a like distinguished principal engineer. He makes like over 2-3 million a year. Like he makes crazy money as an engineer. And people are always blown away, like, oh my God, this engineer, like he makes $2-3 million a year. And it's like, you don't understand that the initiatives that he leads, they're not fun. They're not cool tech. They're not crazy. They're very boring, but they drive significant revenue to the company. And when he fixes a problem, it's a problem that's costing them millions of dollars. And he does it only in a way that it brings impact. And so, but Dustin, I agree with you. 90% needs to go towards business impact. But if you just focus on the business, some of the best stuff is just made by experimenting. Like we tried out the AWS Lambda router. We experimented with all sorts of stuff at WunderGraph, and it actually led to some stuff that's actually used by our customers today.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing.
It's always a matter of calculating risk and benefits. Like if the benefit of going this approach huge, then we can think about to invest in it. But I don't want to write my own JavaScript framework just for the sake of having fun and use it in my application. Like yeah. Yeah.
I'd agree. And you know what I struggle with, and like I don't think people understand this, is that the biggest thing is not that you can't do it. It's just that you don't even know what you don't know. Like, oh, I want to build my own content management system. And it's like people have been doing this for a while. They've made strict decisions because of their learnings. Same thing with building our router or a GraphQL Federation platform. Like there's reasons we made these choices because of some of the mistakes that we made early on. And it's like when you try to build something or self-host something, like you don't actually know what you don't know before you even start building because you haven't been so deep into it.
I mean, you can write your own interpreter, your own database. I think you will learn a lot, but I don't want to care about the fundamentals when I have to build something complex. Yeah.
But when do you care about the fundamentals?
When?
Yeah, when?
When I mean, I would say every time. There must be. I think there must be a good reason why you have to change fundamentals. For example, something does not exist yet. If it would enable your use case, yeah.
Like if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. It does not exist. It would be a big differentiator for you on the market. Look at Torso. They're now reinventing or rewriting SQLite.
Why are they doing that?
First of all, nobody would ever have done this because everybody knows that SQLite is super reliable. It is the most used database in the world, and now they're rewriting it in Rust, and I think they want to leverage that on the edge, and yeah.
But this whole thing with the edge, so there was a GraphQL backend as a service company that was all on the edge. And then Vercel was like, oh, deploy the edge. But then Vercel kind of like dropped that initiative. Like what is the edge? And like I'm seeing more and more people like care less about it, if you will.
Yeah, it's about being local, being near to your customers. It's about latency. It's about Yeah, I would say performance. But you need a good use case. I mean, I think we wouldn't have any benefit from deploying our control plane to the edge if our existing use case is already more than good enough for that. Like, yeah,
I would agree. The only use cases that I can understand is like, so for example, like with some of our e-commerce companies, like for them, latency and like the web page being slow, it actually loses money for them. So they have to be the most performant and it has to be fast, because the way you think about it is, I'm a user. I go on and I don't know, some Shein or some Fashion Nova. And if my experience on there isn't good, like I'm adding things to my shopping cart, and when I go to click checkout, it takes like 10 seconds, the likelihood that I leave is extremely high because it's slow and it's not performant. So I can see for like e-commerce, edge being important, because you want to be as quickly as possible, get them from shopping to the counter to pay and then paying. But do you see anywhere else benefits? Like maybe like streaming? Streaming would be good.
Yeah, it really depends on the use case. I mean, even if you deploy your application or your logic at the edge, your database will probably still sit somewhere else in your infrastructure. So that's why Fastly, Cloudflare trying to build a complete ecosystem around that. You have a key value store, you have a S3 API, you have now even a database. So then it makes absolutely sense. You can build complete application at the edge. And I mean, what we did it already, like in Cosmo Cloud, as shown in the architecture. So we have implemented a Cloudflare worker that is connected with an S3 integration, where we upload our router configurations and make them accessible to the customers. So we have developed a small application that is essentially an HTTP server and has an S3 integration. You can call it its database. And why did we do this? Because it's so easy to deploy. We can be sure it's scalable. It works everywhere. It's cost efficient, and we don't have to deal with anything like deployment, maintenance, because it's essentially for us it's just a script.
Yeah, basically. And it works pretty well. One of the biggest things I hear with like our customers, so for example, we have a great uptime. Obviously, since we provide Cosmo managed, we have to adhere to certain SLAs. And since customers self-host the router, so they self-host the router on their infrastructure, and then they interact through our studio and our platform with a. Oh, are we almost at time? I just realized this. Okay. I just realized we're almost at time, and you have an interview after this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will ask this last question, and then we're gonna have to end a little bit early because we started late. But Dustin is interviewing, and so we're actively hiring. But the router is self-hosted. It interacts through the control plane, which is a Cloudflare, like you said. What happens if our infrastructure goes down? The customer has the router self-hosted on their infrastructure, but their customers won't be affected, right? The only things that'll be affected is they maybe can't log into the Cosmos Studio. And stress a little bit on why we made that architectural decision and like what would be the impact if we go down.
Yeah. So first of all, we didn't want to enforce people or to opt in our cloud, because there are a lot of use cases where people don't want to use Cosmo Router. And because we have integrated OpenTelemetry, it's their choice if they want to push the data, for example, to Datadog, to New Relic. So, yeah. And also, it's very, very important that we can say that that our infrastructure is not a critical factor for being operational on their end. So it's a huge benefit also for us that we can't break customers, or we are not the factor when they have issues. So
I think this comes from our learning as well from Cosmo Cloud. You remember like when Fly would go down, our customers were affected?
Yeah. So right now there are two ways to deploy the supergraph configuration. So you can build it locally and pass it directly to the router. Then the router is completely autonomous. It has no connection at all to the control plane and to Cosmo, except for analytics purposes. But this is handled gracefully when something goes wrong. And then there is the option that you can issue a graph token, and the router will pull that configuration from the CDN. And even in case of the CDN is down, by the way, we provide like 6.9 on the CDN availability. Even in that case, the router would be still functional. It would just not be able to pick up the latest graph configuration that has been recently pushed to our control plane. Yeah.
No, it's a good explanation. So I know we're a little bit over, but Dustin, thanks for joining me today since Jens is out of town, and really appreciate you kind of just talking into it. For your first podcast, though, you did a good job. I mean, I told you, it's very chill. We just relax. We talk a little bit of tech. What do you think?
No, it was a great experience. A little bit over time, but yeah. Overall,
I'll let you get to do it then. You have
I
to get
enjoyed
to your interview, right? Yeah, as long as
Yeah.
you enjoyed it, we had a good time. But Dustin,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining us. I'm gonna clip this up. Well, you'll see it on LinkedIn, so make sure you share. And then, yeah, thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.